from D.C. and some other sites and activities in the pro-life movement. If you have a question for Father Frank, we would love to hear from you this morning and every day, 877-573-7825. Hello to all the Facebook friends following us live. Father, I don't know where to begin, but how about we begin in Washington, D.C.? I know you were there at the Supreme Court when the big case from Louisiana went to the High Court. I want to play a few bites. Andrew has a few bites that he's pulled for us, sound bites, as we say in the biz, regarding the reaction of a particular senator who was actually threatening two of the pro-life justices. Let's take a listen. Well, let's. Are we playing Schumer? Or are we playing? Okay, let's play Schumer first. Senator Schumer from New York.
Of course, I didn't intend to suggest anything other than political and public opinion consequences for the Supreme Court, and it is a gross distortion to imply otherwise.
Okay, now let's play the reaction of, how about we have Senator McConnell? Let's see what Senator McConnell had to say yesterday on the Senate floor.
The minority leader of the United States Senate threatened two associate justices of the U.S. Supreme Court, period. There's no other way to interpret that. Even worse, the threat was not clearly political or institutional. As I'll discuss in a moment, these kinds of threats are sadly nothing new from Senate Democrats. This was much broader, much broader. The Democratic leader traveled to the workplace of the two judges, and in front of a crowd of activists, he told those judges, "You will pay the price," right in front of the Supreme Court building. "And you won't know what hit you," he said, right in front of the Supreme Court building. If any American had these words shouted at them from a sidewalk outside their office, they would hear those threats as personal. And most likely they would hear them as threatening or inciting violence. That's how any American would interpret those words if they were directed at us. And that's certainly how the press and leading Democrats would have characterized them if President Trump or any senior Republican had said anything remotely similar.
Yeah. Well,
what say you, Father Frank?
I was there. I was only a few feet from Senator Schumer, so I was among the very first people to hear him say those words. And, to put it in context, there were two competing rallies going on from early in the morning. And I was, of course, participating and helping to lead the pro-life rally right. And I had a separate platform set up where we were doing broadcasting. Many of our friends on social media saw the broadcast. And so I was literally standing right next to the pro-abortion crowd. There was a little barrier in between the two groups. And so I was hearing all the things that they were saying. And the context here was a very, very highly energized crowd that all morning long was listening to rhetoric about how terrible this court decision could be, and they were hyping it up in the sense of, the sky is falling, Roe v. Wade is going to be reversed tomorrow, abortion is going to be made illegal, and they're taking away our fundamental rights. And Schumer's remarks before he made the direct comments to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, he said this. He said they're taking away our fundamental rights. So the whole thing was in this sky is falling context, which actually isn't true. It does not accurately represent what the case was about. And we could talk a little bit more about what the case is about. We've been very involved in it. It's about state regulations for the health and safety of women. The law under review by the court does not prohibit a single abortion. Now, Schumer knows that. These guys know better. They know what the case is about, but they're trying to incite the crowd. They're trying to incite the far left. They're trying to give fodder for their fundraising. I mean, it's very clear what's going on here. But, like the majority leader, Senator McConnell, just said in that quote, it was very, very clear. I mean, any sane, reasonable person would take his words as a threat. If he meant only the political and public relations consequences, then that's what he should say. He should know better to realize that his words can be interpreted in in terms of physical violence. They could be interpreted in terms of Kavanaugh, we're going to do to you exactly what we did during your confirmation hearings. We're going to dig up more dirt. We're going to throw around more lies and make up more slander and get more witness. I mean, it could mean all of those things. It could mean, we're going to introduce an impeachment process against the two of you. If you see, but here's the problem: whatever he meant. Even if he's saying, oh, I didn't mean any physical violence. Okay, listen, I like to believe that about people. Take them at their word. They didn't mean any physical violence. I'm not going to presume that they meant physical violence. But even if you're talking about political repercussions or public relations stuff, the Supreme Court is supposed to be an independent entity, independent of political pressure. That's why, by the way, the justices wear black. The color black of their robes is meant to indicate that neutrality, so to speak. It's not red, it's not blue, it's not left, it's not right. It's meant to be, their role is one thing, judgment. That's why they're called judges. Their role is to exercise judgment, not to pass laws, not to nullify laws, and not to enforce laws. Their role is simply to judge the legal rights and responsibilities and damage that may have been done to contending parties that bring a case or controversy before the court. That's their role. They're not supposed to be, pressured by politicians, political parties, interest groups, or anything like that. Now, we have been making a lot of the fact that this is the first abortion case that Gorsuch and Kavanaugh are hearing, the first one on the merits of the questions raised in the case. And so that has been on people's minds, this is the first time that obviously the Supreme Court has changed since the last abortion case, which was 4 years ago, and it has changed in our direction. There's no question about that. But certainly his remarks were way, way out of line.
Father, how much of this is trying to deflect? Because what they're not looking at, and they don't want people to realize, is a lack of any type of regulations or controls in terms of really making sure that, as if any of these facilities could be safe. They're certainly not safe for the baby, and the procedure is not. So, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
In terms of being equal to other independent facilities,
right,
medical facilities that have these regulations. I mean, let's not even medical locations, medical facilities. Look at a hair salon, a nail salon. These types of places have more stringent regulations than abortion facilities.
There are two books I want to urge our listeners to read. One is called Lime 5, L-I-M-E, and the number 5. It is a book Mark Crutcher and a number of pro-life leaders, including myself, put together back in the mid-1990s, cataloging the horrible malpractice of the abortion industry. Lime 5. The other book, shorter than that one, is called Unsafe. It was published by Americans United for Life just a few years ago, and it's basically along the same lines. It documents health and safety violations committed by, and people should note this, legal abortion clinics, okay, health and safety violations committed in 32 states, 227 abortion facilities between 2008 and 2016. So this brings it right up to date. The other one, like I say, was from the mid to late 1990s. This one, 2008 to 2016. And what do we find? What we find is the following kinds of violations. Untrained staff. I mean, literally, people administering anesthesia who are high school students. Expired medications. Lack of emergency medical equipment or non-functioning equipment. Failure to follow proper protocols for the handling of medications, recording the amount of dosage that the patient was just given, failure to monitor their vital signs, failure to keep the medical records updated or safely and confidentially stored, physical deterioration of the facility, unsanitary and unsafe conditions, etc., etc. 1,400 of these kinds of violations were uncovered and documented between 2008 and 2016. And so all of this is the context of this case. And like you said, this sky is falling, Roe is going away tomorrow narrative of Schumer and the other side is largely meant to deflect from what the real issue is here, that legal abortion does not mean safe abortion. It never has. And this case is shining a spotlight on that, and they don't want to hear it.
Right, and so they make us look like the bad guys, or anybody who is pro-life look like the bad guys, and deflect. And you have several actresses who are out there screaming and yelling and saying that they're so happy they have their careers. In addition to Michelle Williams at the Golden Globes, I posted a story that was on the Federalist about another, I think she's a late-night talk show host, who's saying she's so grateful for her healthy kids, her husband, her big house, her job, and it's all because she had bodily autonomy. I love how they use these words and these phrases and don't come right out and say abortion.
Right. Yes, and the interesting thing is, I was on a plane last night, as I am most days, and I was sitting there thinking to myself as we were. It took us a very long. It took us. This is very. Those of you who travel a lot, you know how annoying this is. After a long day of travel, you finally land at your destination. It took us 35 minutes before we were parked at the gate. They're taxiing around and delaying and stopping and waiting. So I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, if I got up right now out of my seat, I would be violating the law, and I'd be, getting some trouble, and they'd have to stop the plane. And, I cannot do what I want with my body right now. I mean, I could cross my legs if I want. I could fold my arms. I could, but I can't get up out of. Nobody on this plane, and nobody on that plane would dispute that either. I mean, we were all tired. We were all like, "Get us off this plane." It was past midnight, and we're sitting there. I said, "What the heck is going on here?" And it's like, "No, you cannot get up out of your seat." So when they talk about the bodily autonomy. Well, first of all, even if that were some kind of an argument here, when does bodily autonomy start? Doesn't it start when you get your body, and therefore it applies to the baby too?
Right. Well, it's so ridiculous. They say, well, I have a right to do whatever I want with my body. Really? Since when? Nobody has a right to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
So you don't wear seatbelts, you drink and drive, you take illegal drugs, you go up and somebody and punch them in the face because you're angry and think there's going to be no responsibility or no repercussions from that. It's so ridiculous. But what has happened is the media are hook, line, and sinker in on this, and so they keep putting these phrases out there.
Yeah, that's right.
But the bodily autonomy, and I'm trying to remember what Michelle Williams said, because she said something to her, employ my right to do something. I forget, but they never ever say the right to kill my baby.
Yeah, it's like talk about
I sacrificed the life of my child for my career.
Right. Talk about what you're talking about,
Right.
If you think it's so right, be honest about it. So, but they can't because they know they're wrong. But this case is important, and it may not be anything more than a very, very, very narrow ruling. I mean, you dig into this case, and I want to invite people to do so, actually, on SupremeCourtVictory.com. First of all, we've got a prayer campaign going there, so you can pray each day for victory in this case. But secondly, the documents of the case, it's very, very helpful to read those. Different pro-life groups like us, we have submitted these documents called Friend of the Court briefs, amicus briefs. Amicus in Latin means friend. Mm-hmm. So a Friend of the Court brief is a supplementary document that the court accepts. Okay, it actually makes it part of the paperwork that the justices then review. And various groups who have an interest and want to express their support for one or the other side of the case may do so in their official legal documents, and they develop one or another aspect of the argument. They're they're very interesting to read, and various pro-life groups that all our listeners know about have issued these briefs. We did, for example, National Right to Life and Americans United for Life. Many states, too, by the way. When I was in D.C. over these last couple of days, I was with the attorneys general of several different states who came in person. There were about 20 states, well, actually more than that, 22 states or so, that filed official briefs in support of Louisiana, of this law. and the attorneys general were there to show their support. I spoke personally with the Attorney General of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, who, of course, is front and center in this case because he's charged with defending this law. And very good conversation. I mean, these are men and women who believe. They're people of faith. They know that life has to be protected and preserved. They know how unregulated the abortion industry is. And at issue here, too, is what they also know is that the legislators of a state can legislate. You know, one of the issues in this case is, you know, Louisiana knows best what it has to legislate for the women of Louisiana. The Supreme Court shouldn't be stepping in and saying, well, because it deals with abortion, we're going to decide which regulations are medically appropriate. That's what's going on here. There's no other surgery, neither before Roe v. Wade nor since, where the courts determine the medical appropriateness of regulations on those doctors or on those facilities or on those procedures. No other area of medicine. It's the states that, through their lawmaking process and deliberations and testimonies and amendments, and they have the tools to create the right kinds of laws, and that's exactly what Louisiana did. By the way, implementing something Roe v. Wade itself says, that the states can legislate to make sure abortions that are carried out are done so in a way that maximizes the health and safety of the woman. Roe v. Wade says that.
So what's the problem with having? Why are they so against? Because I want you to explain it. I know the answer to the question.
Yeah.
But what are they so stinking upset about? Because they're asking for admitting privileges for doctors. Why is this such a big deal to them?
There's a number of reasons. They will claim that, oh, well, you know, we won't be able to get admitting privileges. So first of all, that should tell people something about the quality of these abortionists, right? They're at the lowest rung of the ladder, as we've always said. They're the losers and washouts of medicine.
And isn't it because many of these abortionists are so transient that they move around from
Well, that's the other thing. You have these circuit rider abortionists, as we call them, who, because of the decline in the number of abortionists, and because, you know, doctors don't want to use their skills to kill, they want to use their skills to save lives, not take them. But the point is that there has been a strong decline, and so you've got these abortionists that hop from state to state to state, and so, you know, admitting privileges, you know, what if she calls me with a problem and I'm 300 miles away, you know? So they know that they, first of all, for some of them, it will be very difficult to fulfill. But, you know, the other interesting thing about the Louisiana case is that the courts looked very closely at the record and realized these physicians in Louisiana who do abortions, they either already have the admitting privileges or it would not be impossible for them to get them. And yet what the court actually said this, the Fifth Circuit Court which upheld this law, it wasn't that the law created an obstacle to abortion, which is one of the relevant constitutional issues at stake here. It's not that the law created an obstacle to exercise the so-called right to abortion. It's that the abortionists sat on their hands, and that's the words of the court. They sat on their hands and didn't do what they had to do to get those hospital admitting privileges. So you can't sit on your hands and then blame the state for setting up an obstacle to access to abortion. And another reason may be this, too, that, well, first of all, if the hospitals in Louisiana give admitting privilege to these abortionists, they do a more thorough background check than the clinics themselves do. And first of all, it's just bringing these clinics up to the same standards as other surgical facilities in Louisiana. They already have the law of hospital admitting privileges. It's the abortion industry that's the exception. So they're just trying to bring them up to these standards. But once you do that, you're more highly credentialed. This abortion facility in Louisiana was having a radiologist and an ophthalmologist doing abortions. It's like, are you even qualified to do an abortion? And so it's the credentialing that's at issue as well. But then you also become subject to it's called the National Practitioner Data Bank. Someone who is credentialed in this way, you know, any kind of complaints against them, problems with their license being challenged, malpractice suits, et cetera, this information goes into a national database. And I think these abortionists know full well that if they subject themselves to that process, a lot of ugly stuff is going to be exposed that they would rather keep secret.
And that's what it's all about. Father, thanks for spending a little extra time with us this morning. I know you have your staff meeting
yes.
at 8:37. You can find Father Frank Well, all over the place, Washington, New York, wherever it takes him, but you can follow his schedule at priestforlife.org. We'll be right back, and we'll find out some wonderful events going on, including all the great work of Catholic